They say some places never die. Their walls remember every scream, every broken breath, every plea for mercy that went unanswered. St. Elora Hospital was one of those places. It sat on the outskirts of a small town in Pennsylvania, surrounded by rotting trees and overgrown weeds. Locals avoided it. No one went near after dark. The hospital had been shut down for over 30 years after a fire and a string of mysterious patient deaths. The building was still standing, but the windows were black, the roof half collapsed, and the sign out front hung by a single rusted chain. Stand Elora Psychiatric Institute. I had heard stories about it for years. I ran a small YouTube channel about abandoned places, urban exploration, forgotten architecture, haunted legends. But St. Elora was different. Everyone warned me not to go. Even other explorers refused to film there. But that only made me more curious. It was late October when I finally decided to visit. The air was sharp and cold, and the forest around the property looked skeletal, bare branches clawing at the gray sky. My friend Jake agreed to come along. He was my cameraman and the only person crazy enough to follow me into places like this. We arrived around 9 p.m. The building loomed ahead like a dying giant. The smell of mildew and rust hit as soon as we stepped out of the car. "Dude," Jake muttered, adjusting his flashlight, "this place looks like hell itself." "Exactly," I said, forcing a laugh. "That's why people will watch." We entered through a broken side door. Inside, the darkness was almost physical, thick, heavy, swallowing our light beams. The air was damp and stale, filled with the faint scent of smoke and something metallic. Our footsteps echoed down the long hallway. Peeling paint hung like dead skin from the walls. Old wheelchairs sat overturned in corners. Somewhere above, a pipe groaned. "Okay," I whispered to the camera, "we're inside St. Elora Hospital. This place was shut down in 1988 after reports of illegal experiments on patients and, well, whatever else the government didn't want people to find out." The deeper we went, the colder it became. The hallways twisted into darkness like veins, leading to wards labeled isolation, observation, and therapy. Each room looked the same: rusted beds, shattered glass, papers scattered across the floor. But one thing stood out. Near the nurses' station, we found a file cabinet still intact. Inside were folders filled with patient records. Most were dated from the 1980s. Handwritten notes, medication lists, strange remarks like "patient speaks to walls" or "refuses to sleep in room 13." Jake filmed everything. "Bro, this is gold," he said, smiling. Then we both heard it. A whisper. Soft, faint, like someone exhaling our names. I froze. "Did you hear that?" Jake nodded slowly, his face pale. "Yeah, but where's it coming from?" We stood still, holding our breath. The whisper came again, this time clearer, closer. It sounded like a woman's voice. "Help me." Jake swung the flashlight toward the end of the hall, but there was nothing there, only darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Is anyone here?" No answer. But something moved. A door creaked open by itself, just a few inches, enough to make my heart stop. We approached it slowly. The door led into a small patient room. A single rusted bed frame sat in the corner, and on the wall, written in faded red paint, were 3 words: "Still here now." I felt my stomach twist. "Jake, record this." He lifted the camera, but then the light flickered and died. The screen went black. What the hell? Before I could finish, a loud metallic bang echoed from somewhere deeper inside the hospital. It sounded like a door slamming shut. We turned and ran toward the exit hallway. My flashlight shook in my hand, shadows leaping across the walls. The air grew thicker, heavier, like the whole building was holding its breath. When we finally reached the entrance, the side door we came through was closed, completely shut. "I didn't close that," Jake said, panicked. "We tried pulling it open. It wouldn't budge, not even an inch." Then we heard it again. The whisper, right behind us. Don't leave. The flashlight flickered, and in that strobing light, for less than a second, I saw her. A woman in a torn nurse's uniform. Her skin was gray, her mouth stitched shut. She tilted her head slowly. And then she was gone. We didn't speak. We didn't look back. We just ran. Somehow, we managed to find another broken window near the reception area and climbed out. The cold night air hit me like a wave of life. When we finally got to the car, Jake turned on the camera. The footage showed everything until the flashlight died. After that, static. But in the static, faintly, just before it cut off completely, there was a voice. "Welcome back, Doctor." The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a mind full of static. All night, I kept seeing her, the nurse with the stitched mouth, standing at the end of the hall, watching. Jake called around 10 a.m. "Dude," he said, his voice hoarse, "I looked at the footage again. You need to see this." He sounded shaken. I drove to his apartment right away. His place was a mess. Coffee cups, open laptops, camera equipment everywhere. On his screen, the video from last night played on loop. It looked the same at first. Our flashlights, the empty halls, the sound of our boots echoing on the tiles. Then, he froze the frame. "There," he said, pointing. In the corner of the shot, right before the flashlight cut out, something moved. A figure, tall and thin, standing in the dark. Its head twitched unnaturally fast, like it was caught between frames. I felt the hairs rise on my neck. That wasn't there before. Jake nodded, and that voice at the end, I isolated the audio. He played it again. This time, it was clear. A man's voice, calm, cold, whispering through the static. "Welcome back, Dr. Hayes." I stared at the screen. Who's Dr. Hayes? Jake shrugged. "I don't know, but I searched the records online. There really was a Dr. Samuel Hayes at St. Elora. He ran the psychiatric ward in the late 1970s. Apparently, he vanished after the fire." That name hit me like a punch. "Wait," I said. "The nurse called me that last night." Jake blinked. "She said, 'Doctor?'" "Yeah," I whispered, "right before the light went out." For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then Jake said, "We have to go back." I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "After what happened? Are you serious?" "Yes," he said. "We didn't finish exploring. We didn't even check the basement. That's probably where the real story is." I wanted to refuse, but something inside me, curiosity, maybe obsession, kept whispering, "You need to know the truth." So, that night, we went back. The drive was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the windshield. St. Elora loomed in the dark like a rotting carcass. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt the same suffocating weight in the air, that heavy, damp stillness that made every sound echo too loud. We entered through the same broken window. The interior smelled worse: mold, wet wood, and something that reminded me of copper. Jake held up the camera. "Round two," he muttered, forcing a grin. We moved through the main hall, our flashlights sweeping over the same abandoned rooms. Everything looked the same, but the atmosphere was different. The shadows felt thicker, the silence heavier. Near the nurses' station, I noticed something we hadn't seen before: a set of double doors, chained shut, with a faded sign reading, "Authorized personnel only, basement access." Jake grinned. "Bingo!" We broke the chain with a small crowbar. The metal clanged through the hall like a gunshot. The doors creaked open to reveal a narrow stairwell leading down into darkness. I felt the temperature drop instantly. We descended slowly. Each step echoed. The air grew colder, thicker, almost wet. There was a faint humming sound, mechanical, rhythmic, like an old generator still running deep below. When we reached the bottom, our flashlights revealed a long corridor lined with pipes. The walls were covered in grime, and strange reddish stains marked the floor. At the end of the hall, a sign read, "Therapy Labs, Restricted Area." Jake whispered, "They had labs down here." I nodded. Probably experimental treatment rooms, electroshock, chemical trials. We walked forward. The doors were labeled with numbers instead of names, 1 through 7. Most were locked, but room 4 was open. Inside, we found metal tables, rusted restraints, and glass jars filled with cloudy liquid. Some still had shapes floating inside them. Small shapes, like organs. Jake gagged. Jesus Christ! Then, from somewhere behind us, a sound echoed, a slow, dragging footstep. We turned. Nothing. "Probably rats," Jake whispered, though his voice trembled. But then the sound came again, closer, and another, and another. The flashlight slickered. The air pressure shifted, like something invisible had entered the room. "Who's there?" I called out. The sound stopped. Silence. Then, softly, a woman's voice. The same one from last night. "Dr. Hayes, you came back." Jake's flashlight cut out completely. Mine flickered, casting quick flashes of movement in the hallway, something tall, thin, and moving toward us in jerky motions. "Run," Jake hissed. We sprinted down the corridor. Behind us, metal scraped against the floor, followed by the echo of something whispering our names. When we reached the stairwell, the door slammed shut on its own. We were trapped. Jake yanked at the handle, cursing. I shined the flashlight back down the hall and froze. The figure was standing there, half in shadow. It looked like a nurse, but her body was bent backward, her spine arching at an impossible angle. Her face was covered in a bloody cloth stitched across her mouth. She tilted her head and whispered, "The doctor must finish his work." Jake screamed. We threw ourselves against the door until it finally burst open, and we scrambled up the stairs. By the time we got outside, we were drenched in sweat and rain. I collapsed on the grass, gasping for air. Jake dropped the camera and stared at me. What the hell was that? I couldn't answer. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. We drove away in silence. Neither of us spoke the whole way back. But that night, when I checked the footage, the camera was still recording. It captured everything, the voices, the footsteps, even that final moment in the basement. And right before the video ended, there was one last frame. A close-up of my face. But I wasn't holding the camera. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, the nurse, bent, broken, whispering through stitches that should have silenced her forever. By morning, Jake still hadn't called. I assumed he needed rest. We'd both been shaken. But by the second day, when his phone went straight to voicemail, I drove over to his place. His car was in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was dark, curtains drawn, the TV flickering static. His camera equipment sat open on the table, the same footage still paused from 2 nights ago. "Jake?" I called out. No answer. Then I heard it, a low humming sound from the next room. I stepped closer. The bathroom light was on. The door was slightly open. When I pushed it, it creaked loudly. Jake was sitting on the floor, fully dressed, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were red, dark circles beneath them. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Jake?" He didn't turn. "They won't stop whispering." I froze. "What do you mean?" "They follow me everywhere," he said quietly. "In the static, in the mirrors. They say your name." "My name?" He nodded slowly. "Dr. Hayes." A chill ran through me. Jake stood up, his movements slow and stiff. They want us to finish what was started. I took a step back. You're not making sense. He turned toward me, and for a brief second, his reflection in the mirror didn't move. It just stared back, expressionless, hollow-eyed. Jake? He blinked, and the reflection caught up. We have to go back, he said flatly. She said she's waiting. No, absolutely not, I said, backing away. We're done. But Jake didn't even seem to hear me. He walked past me, grabbed his keys, and left. By the time I reached the front door, his car was already gone. That night, I sat in my apartment, watching the footage over and over, trying to find a logical explanation. Every sound, every flicker, every whisper, I dissected it all. At 2:13 a.m., my screen glitched. For a second, the video froze on a frame that hadn't been there before. It showed me and Jake in the basement, but there was a third figure standing behind us. A tall man in a white coat. His ID badge read, Dr. Samuel Hayes. I slammed the laptop shut. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, my phone was buzzing. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice. Soft, calm, familiar. Dr. Hayes, we're ready for you now. The line went dead. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, something pulled me. Like gravity. Like the hospital wasn't done with me yet. By evening, I found myself back in the car, driving through heavy fog towards St. Elora. The building looked worse than before. The air around it was colder, heavier. My headlights barely cut through the mist. As I stepped out, I saw another car parked near the entrance. Jake's. Jake! I shouted. No response. I went inside. The flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. The same hallways, the same peeling walls. Only now, everything felt rearranged, like the hospital had shifted in my absence. The nurse's station was gone. In its place was a long corridor lined with flickering overhead lights. I walked forward slowly, my footsteps echoing too loud. Jake? I turned a corner and froze. He was standing there, facing the wall. His camera hung from his hand, still recording. His other hand twitched slightly. Jake? I whispered. He turned around. His eyes were blank, pupils blown wide. His voice came out hollow. They're waiting for you downstairs. What? He smiled. It wasn't his smile. You shouldn't keep your patients waiting, doctor. Then his head twitched sharply to the side, and he dropped to his knees like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The flashlight flickered, and every light in the corridor burst at once. I ran. Doors slammed shut behind me, one by one. The air was filled with whispers, hundreds of them, all speaking over each other. Dr. Hayes, help us. Finish the treatment. I turned a corner and came face to face with a door labeled basement access, the same one we had broken before. But this time, it was already open. A faint red light glowed from below. I knew I should leave, but something inside me whispered otherwise. You were meant to return. I started down the stairs. Halfway down, the walls began to pulse, slowly, like they were breathing. The sound of metal tools scraping echoed from below. When I reached the bottom, the corridor looked different, newer, brighter. The lights were working, the air clean. It looked alive. People in hospital gowns walked past me, whispering. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths stitched. At the end of the corridor stood the nurse, still bent, still silent. She raised a trembling hand and pointed toward an open door. Inside was a small operating room, and on the table lay a man in a white coat. His face was burned, his chest stitched open, but his ID tag gleamed under the light. Dr. Samuel Hayes. The corpse's eyes snapped open. You took my place, he whispered. I stumbled back. The nurse's voice filled the room, muffled but clear in my mind. Every doctor must return to finish his work. I screamed and ran, the walls twisting around me like a maze. The corridor stretched endlessly, the lights flickering red. Then, ahead, I saw Jake again. He was standing in front of the exit, camera pointed at me. "Say it," he whispered. "What?" "Say your name." I shook my head. "Jake, stop." He stepped closer. "Say it. You know who you are." The air grew heavier, the whispers louder. The name echoed through my head again and again until I couldn't hold it back anymore. The lights exploded. The camera fell. Everything went black. I don't remember how long I'd been running. Time had become meaningless inside St. Elora Hospital. The corridors stretched endlessly, twisting, folding back onto themselves like some terrible labyrinth. The whispers never stopped. Hundreds of voices, all speaking at once, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Finish your work, finish your work, finish your work." Somewhere behind me, I heard Jake's voice again, flat, hollow. "Dr. Hayes, don't fail." I stumbled into the old operating room, the same one from the basement, but now it was illuminated, sterile and cold, like it had never been abandoned. On the metal table lay a figure covered in a white sheet. The nurse appeared behind the table, her stitched mouth moving as though she were silently chanting. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse like lungs, synchronized with my own heartbeat. I forced myself to step closer. My reflection in the surgical lights shimmered unnaturally. I wasn't me. My hands were pale, shaking. The whispers grew louder. I pulled back the sheet. It was Jake, his eyes wide, blank, staring. The flesh on his chest had been crudely stitched back together. Blood darkened the sheet. And yet he breathed, slowly, but undeniably alive. "Jake?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He turned his head towards me. "It's your turn," he said, voice no longer his own. The words came in perfect unison with hundreds of whispers surrounding me. I tried to step back. The nurse glided towards me, impossibly fast, holding a rusted scalpel. The walls themselves seemed to close in, stretching the room. The whispers grew into screams. "Doctor, complete the final treatment." I felt myself being pulled toward the table, not by anyone's hands, but by some invisible force. My legs moved of their own accord. The voices filled my head. "You are Dr. Hayes. You belong here." I screamed, I fought, but my body obeyed. The nurse leaned over me. For the first time, I saw her face clearly. The flesh under the stitches was raw and decayed, eyes black, void of humanity. She whispered something only I could hear. Every doctor must return, to heal them, to join us. I realized then the horrifying truth. The fire, the missing patients, the disappearances. St. Elora never closed. Its soul had never died. Every doctor, every caretaker who entered had been absorbed, trapped to continue the hospital's work. The operating table pulled me down. I felt my own body separating from my mind, being stitched into the walls, becoming part of the hospital. The whispers celebrated, growing louder and louder. And then I saw them, all the patients, floating in the air, stitched, hollow-eyed, waiting. Their voices merged with the whispers. "Welcome back, doctor. Welcome back." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My reflection in the surgical lights was no longer my own. I was him, Dr. Hayes. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the nurse standing over the table, tilting her head. Her stitched mouth stretched into something like a smile, and she whispered, "The treatment is complete." Hours, days, or years later, I have no sense of time. Other explorers come. They hear the whispers, they see the lights, they think they are brave, and they too will be welcomed. St. Elora Hospital does not forgive, it does not forget, it only waits, always waiting.